reformers. Lessons from the lives and teachings of great leaders, reformers and administrators. அதுக்கப்புறம் contribution of moral thinkers, philosophers from India and okay. நீங்க எத்திக்ஸ் டெப்தா படிக்கணும்னா இந்த இங்க படி. ஓகே, இது என்னன்னா ஒன்றும் இல்லை, எதுவும் கான்செப்ட்ஸ் ஒன்றும் இல்லை, பட் ஆன்சர்ஸ் கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ட் பண்ண இங்கே ரொம்ப யூஸ்ஃபுல். ஓகே, ஒவ்வொரு ஆன்சர்லையும் உங்களுக்கு டக்கட்டு வரும். இதை கோட் பண்ணீங்கன்னா எட்ஜர். ஓகே, let us start the great leaves. Let us start with the lives of the Indian philosophers. The lives of Indian philosophers. In the philosophers, ancient, medieval, modern, modern, contemporary. Ancient and medieval, modern, contemporary. Okay. ஒவ்வொரு ஃபிலாசபர் படிக்கிறப்போ அந்த ஏஜ்ல எந்த ஏஜ்ல அவங்க அந்த ஃபிலாசபி அந்த எத்திக்கல் ஆஸ்பெக்ட்ஸ் எந்த ஏஜ்ல கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ட் ஆச்சுன்றத தெளிவாக. ஓகே, ஒரு பேக்ரவுண்டு, ஏஜினுடைய பேக்ரவுண்ட் கூட அதை பார்க்கணும். இந்த ஏரியாஸ் தான் உங்களுக்கு ஆன்சர்ஸ், இந்த ஏரியாஸில் தான் உங்களுக்கு ஆன்சர்ஸ் ரொம்ப கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ட். இந்த ஏரியா யூஸ்ஃபுல்லாக say great lives of Indian counterparts in ancient India. The lessons from the lessons of human values, individual moralities, and the ethical social traits from the great lives of the ancient Indian could be acknowledged with the Mahavira and the Gautama. Mahavira, the age background, the Mahavira and the Gautama Buddha. See, இந்த ஏரியா நீங்க படிக்கிறது வந்து ஒரு சிவில் சர்வெண்ட்டுக்கு என்ன தேவைன்றது படி. ஒவ்வொருத்தர் வாழ்க்கையிலையும் ஒரு சிவில் சர்வெண்ட் என்ன தேவைன்ற ஐடியால படி. It belongs to the 6th century BC, known for disruption, the administrative crisis and the disruption. It was the economic disruption, and it was known for the ritual monopoly of the spiritual world was of ritual, Brahmanical ritual, and that led to reaction called as Shramanic reaction, that is Shramanic shift, Brahmanas and Shramanas. Brahmanical traditions and Shramanic traditions are the two traditions in India. The basics of the civilization, Indian civilization, would be categorized with the Brahmanic and the Shramanic roots. Brahmanic and the Shramanic roots. See, that is the understanding of the age. The 6th century BC. The entire for 200 years, it was the economic disruption, then ritual monopoly, and that led to Shramanic reactions, in which the lives of Mahavira and Gautama Buddha have the similarities. Both of them proved that public excellence is can be acknowledged only from outside. That is inside out journey, inside out explorations. Pragmatic philosophy categorizes the people as once born, twice born. Once born, self-attitude, that is manages. Twice born, self is independent. Throughout the life they struggled. That means an attitude of a socio-economic system. So inside out journey. That means public governance cannot be cultivated without inner character, which is oriented to welfare, collective welfare of the society. That was the common of both Mahavira and Buddha. What are the teachings on the ethical aspects of the life of Mahavira, which is presently relevant? The presently relevant one. That means the presently relevant an aspect in the point of view of civil services. One is Mahavira's idea of Jiva Ajiva, a Jiva Ajiva worldview. Jiva Ajiva worldview. That stated that all the elements of the world, universe, represented with a consciousness of the Jiva, which seems to be a seed for environmental ethics, and the environmental stewardship. That means human as a steward of securing, conserving the environment and the resources. They are accountable to the trustee of public resources. Jaina philosophy establishes an ethical structure for the public servants, with basically considering themselves as the trustees of the public resources. Then second, there exist the ideas of Mahavira emphasize that the truth is of multidimensional. The truth is of the multidimensional, whereas the human perceptions to understand the truth is always limited. As like the blind man defining elephant in their own perception. When the blind man touched the trunk, they called elephant is a trunk. Touched the body, they called elephant as a body. But elephant has different dimensions. So that is called as Anekantavada. Anekantavada or Sayatvada. Anekantavada or Sayatvada. It should be the glue of the public servant in approach that the realities are multidimensional. Sayatvada, which means the theory of maybe. The theory of maybe. That maybe, the theory of maybe. That means that tends the public servant for a deductive, for objectivity, humility and objectivity. Not act with any preconceived notions, preconceived ideas. Then Mahavira highlights the two important virtues that is essential for the public servant. One is aparigraha. Aparigraha is of non-possession than the need. A public servant should have the virtue of not tending towards more than his need. Aparigraha demands absolute financial probity in public office, a pure trusteeship that is non-possession. Then ahimsa. Ahimsa should be the part of a bureaucratic virtue. That is the aspect of Mahavira, the great life of the Mahavira, which emphasizes on, which is required for the public servant to understand that we are the trustees of the public resources, and there exists the truth and ideas are multidimensional, and ahimsa as the core in action, speech and mind that prohibits the hatred and eliminate the arrogance. Then the aparigraha that eliminate the greed were the virtues to be followed. Then Gautama Buddha's teachings are more relevant to today, for the today's. More relevant for the today's. Gautama Buddha's worldview of the Gautama Buddha establishes a worldview called as Pratya Samupada, that we are in ignorance of not understanding our universe. Our universe consists of only truth of non-permanence, that is anitya. Non-permanence. Anitya or the non-permanence. Non-permanence in which that highlights that the today shall not continue in the future, and today is not the continuity of the past. Everything is subjected to change. The societal evils such as corruption, poverty, a public servant should not evolve a fatigue that the entire system is of rotten. Entire system is of corrupt. It is that is not immune from the change. It would change. Corruption or poverty are not fixed. They can be systematically dismantled by reforms. Systematically dismantled by reforms. By reforms. Where that is reforms and should state that should acknowledge one truth that the problems in the society or dukkha is having origin, the element of origin, that is desire. That is the desire than the need, greed, tanga is a reason for the dukkha. And it is not permanent. It can be removed. It can be dismantled. It can be dismantled. A public servant should have the 8 disciplines. The 8 disciplines that as the Ashtangika Marga, as the Buddha, in which the 4 are very prominent for the public servant. 4 are very prominent. The 4 are, that is the right vision in the cognitive sphere of the public servant. Right vision in the cognitive sphere. Then right livelihood in the affective sphere. In the affective sphere, the right livelihood. That means a regulated life. Then the behavioral sphere, that is the right speech, right action. Right speech and the right action. These are all the habits can be cultivated. The disciplinary habits that can be cultivated. The disciplinary habits that can be cultivated as a solution to live in the life of impermanence. That means in the age of economic disruptions in 21st century, disruptive technologies, disruptive economic behaviors in the 21st century, which disrupts the human relations in the 21st century. We need a tendency, an approach called as middle way path, madhyamika path. Madhyamika path. A madhyamika path, that means a balance, a tending between administrative rigidity and moral compromise, a balance to protect the public interest. To protect the public interest is possible. A balanced profession is possible if we cultivated the habits of the CAB disciplines, cognitive discipline as the right vision, and affective discipline as the right livelihood, and the behavioral discipline. Say that is a comparison. Mahaviras considered the primary problem of the society was of material attachment, whereas Buddha considered that it is dukkha. It is a deep systematic sufferings. Buddha advocated the solution of madhyamika pada. Mahavira advocated the solution of self-restraint, a rigorous self-restraint, sannyasa, self-restraint. Then Buddha considered that a middle way life shall be based on rational inquiry of the problem in all dimensions. Whereas Mahavira considered as the truth as the multi-dimensions, in which our moral compass which directs the life of the public servant, Mahavira states the moral compass of considering ourselves as stewards of the public resources, And Buddha considered that that it is a right vision and the right actions, These are the two philosophers' lives of the ancient India, whose lives delivers the ethical messages of the human values. Whereas in the Western world, the ancient Western world, in which the ancient philosophers, the triad of the Western world, the Western classical triad represented by the lineage of the teacher and pupil, as Socrates, followed by his student Plato and his student Aristotle. Socrates, Plato, student Aristotle. The age that these three great philosophers lived, these three philosophers lived in the age of Greek society tending towards collapse because of the collapse of the empire, that is imperial collapse, where the Greeks at that time known for the monarchical rule, republican rule, democratic republican rule, in which Athens are known for a democratic system that collapsed. Athens are known for the democratic system that was collapsed because of populism. Democracy always known for populistic greed of the people. The people are always tend towards the greed and the wants. By that time, they go to the extent of tolerating the corrupts as the elders. Greeks witnessed at that time, Greek society, known for the imperial collapse. Populist demagogues, that is a demon-like populism. The public manipulated public passions into unjust decisions. In addition, there exists a contemporary teachers, philosophers who guides the society called a sophist, who promoted moralities are different to different people. Some people corrupt, that is their morality. They gain the income of 100 means they have to give at least 20, but tolerate the morality, corruption as a morality. That is the relative morality, and objective justice not exist at all. Justice is relative, as they propagated. So, in which the society known for institutional decays at that time, same 21st century is tending towards the decays, tending populism. You say the US president launches war based on the election pulse in the America. Populist demagogues, imperial collapse, the political collapse, and sophist relativism, in which the sophist relativism relativism. In that, as a reaction to that trend, the three of the philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and the Aristotle. Socrates, Plato, and the Aristotle. Are the Socrates who, the core teaching of the Socrates, who considered knowledge. Knowledge is the core virtue. He stated that the individual become corrupt is not biologically tended himself to become corrupt. It is the act of corruption or injustice. The act of corruption or the injustice. The act of choosing unethical shortcuts is of being ignorant of understanding true knowledge. Ignorant of understanding the true knowledge. It is running an administrative career based on the blind precedence and the script makes the officer to become a mission. It is the knowledge, is a true knowledge. It is a true knowledge. A true knowledge is of an inner realization of goodness. Inner realization of the goodness. You say a man, the Gandhi, who stated that man is but a product of his thoughts. What he thinks he becomes. That is the question in 2019. That it is knowledge tends a knowledge of truth that tends individual life is a product of his thought. So a public servant should have the realization, the interior realization of himself that naturally guides his career in every day. A man is a product of his thought, what he thinks himself. How to gain this knowledge? Socrates states that gaining the knowledge is out of a method called as Elencus. Elencus is called as the Socrates method. Of believing and following the existing notions with the critical inquiries. Existing notions with the critical inquiries. That means a fact of unverified assumptions. A fact of unverified assumptions should subject to dialectical cross-examination. That enable him to refine, that enable to have a refined understanding to arrive the objective truth, called as Socrates method. That means Socrates method of arriving the objective truth with the inquiries, with the skeptical inquiries, with the dialectical inquiries. If something is good, why the gods or correlated with the good? Is that the gods qualified it as a good, or of being good that was loved by the gods? That is loved by the gods. If a divine is qualified as the good things, a divine is qualifying something is good, not either because of being good loved by the divine, or because of the divine qualifying that these are goods and these are bads, in which a person has to make dialectical inquiry. Dialectical means an inquiry of polarized approach. Inquiry of polarized approach, thesis and antithesis, polarized approach, inquiry of the polarized approach. That means that makes a man, an officer, subject his own beliefs, of internal audit, own belief of the internal audit. A life without an internal audit is a waste. A life without internal audit is the waste, is a life of waste. And Socrates stated that moralities that should have a moral fortitude. At any time, a man should be directed by his own moralities. Socrates was given with the punishment of consuming hemlock, a poison, that the person has to die with the poison, in which the friends of the Socrates, sophists of the Socrates in the Athens, visited him at evening and advised him, persuaded him to escape by night. But Socrates refused. He chose to drink hemlock. He stated that this penalty of our judicial system given by the state is my father. It is the state that enabled me to grow. It has given the knowledge. It has given every aspect of my life. So it is even at the time that he is losing his life, he stood for his moralities and the beliefs or the knowledge. That is the life of the Socrates. Consider, knowledge is the virtue. Knowledge is the virtue, and the knowledge has to be attained through the method called as Socrates method, called as Elenchus. Socrates stated every individual is subjected to the personal introspection. A life without the internal audit, is a life of waste, is a life of the waste. And Socrates known for morality, the moralities of the public servant, of being loyal and devotion to the state system. Then it is Plato. It is a Plato Plato being the student of Socrates, who stated that the individual life of the individual should have certain virtues, where he stated it as the cardinal virtues. The cardinal virtues, one is the courage, justice, temperament, courage, justice, temperament, and the courage, justice. Then the temperament and compassion. Temperament and compassion are the individual virtues of the life. And they stated that individual and the state are inseparable one, in which the life of the individual, the conscious of the individual should be based on these cardinal virtues of justice. Justice is defined as with the reason as the Socrates knowledge called by Plato as the reason. As the reason is the most cardinal one than of desire and the desire and the other aspects of the life. Desire and the other aspects of the life. Other aspects of this life. So it is the cardinal virtues. Then internal justice based on the reason. Internal justice based on the reason. The Plato idea of the state. Plato idea of the state and the rulers. Plato stated that the authority should be thrusted to the individual. In the hands of a leader. In the hands of the leaders, authority should be thrusted to the individuals of being the leaders who act with wisdom and immune from the external temptation. That they called by Plato as the philosopher kings. A public servant should be a leader of motivating and should have the value of wisdom and should not be tempted by the external temptations, by the external aspects. Then a ethical leader should act above the prejudice, as like the sun that climbs over the sky and enlighten the dark cave, that enable the lives of the world to feel liberated. Then there need a harmony. The harmony in the society could be provided with the institutions functions with the justice. Plato's life examples, contributions as the cardinal virtues and the nature of public servants and the nature of the public servant's role. Then the Aristotle laid the foundations for the ethics as an academic discipline to study in the human society. Ethics as an academic discipline to study in the human society. Where the Aristotle stated actually defined the excellence of the life called as eudaimonia. Eudaimonia as the excellence of the human life. Eudaimonia is actually a cherished vision of the life of individual and the society. That means excellence, a human flourishing. A human should have the life of flourishing contribution of excellence of excellence in his own domain. In his own domain, a carpenter should exhibit the excellence in his profession. A civil servant should prohibit the excellence in the political governance, in which the success is not measured by materialistic aspects and the numbers, but the standard of human dignity, the standard of dignity in the lives established. That is eudaimonia. That is the eudaimonia, where Aristotle stated that the ethics is not inherited. Ethics can be cultivated into habit. Ethics can be cultivated into habit. It is not a genetic gift. It is not a genetic gift, and it is not an emotional feeling. It is a stable habit. A stable habit based on certain principles called values. Based on certain principles. And with these principles became stable in the actions, stable in the attitude, called as the character. And performed as a repeated action means conduct. That stability is called as the values. So it is the habit. What should be the habit? Aristotle states that the habit of a particular habit is good if it positioned in mean, called as the principle of golden mean. Principle of golden mean is between the deficiency and excess. In between, for example, in between the cowardice towards the injustice to rashness towards the injustice, the golden mean is courage. In between the materialistic consumerism, in between the extreme materialistic consumerism to the miser, between spendthrift, being the spendthrift and the miser, ஒரு கஞ்சத்திற்கும் செலவாளிக்கும் நடுவில். That is golden mean. Golden mean is a virtue, a point located between deficiency and the act of excess. Administratively, the ideological extremism and process paralysis to be rejected. It should be in between. It should be in between one. It should be in between one. The government policies is inseparable compact of both good and the evil. It is the golden mean should be the virtue of justice that a public servant to apply as the 2018 question. You see, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Socrates considered the primary source of morality comes from the inner voice of conscience. Plato, the primary source of morality is of considering above, soul is above the materialistic aspects. And Aristotle is of habit. is of the habit. Then habit, the target of governance, that Socrates stated that corruption is because of ignorance. Eradicating systemic ignorance. Plato stated that it is the justice that creates the harmonies in the institution. Then Aristotle, who emphasized on habituated character cultivation, represents the triad. Socrates considered knowledge as a virtue. Plato considered justice as a virtue. And Aristotle considered golden mean as the prominent virtue. That is the triad, the Western triad. So these were the ancient lives, which includes the Indian lives, which include the Indian lives as the Indian lives and the contributions as Chanakya and Tiruvallur, where the Chanakya's Arthashastra and Tiruvallur belongs to two different types of settings. Chanakya's Arthashastra was of the age of Mauryan imperialism. It is the state influenced all the aspect of the life. So Arthashastra emphasizes the ethical guidance, mostly on the state, called as Rajadharma. Arthashastra considered that the Indriya Jaya, that means the physical attributes, overcoming the physical attributes, Indriya, the physical body is a mission. Arthashastra states is a mission. It demands certain desires. So to overcome Jaya, that means to have the victory of the physical excess of the people, is only through state regulation, Rajadharma, state imposed ethics that gives Shema. That means that gives the Shema, that is the welfare. Shema, the welfare and happiness. Whereas the Tiruvallur belongs to the different social setting, where the Tirukural is the outcome of a life, a legacy of Sangam age, in which no imperial empire exists. It was full of monarchies, chieftainship, and known for cosmopolitanism in the life. Cosmopolitanism, it is materialism. So Tiruvallur emphasized the Purul, which includes the statecraft. That is, state is the part of materialism, and to be regulated by Aram, the virtues. So authority is of not imperial. A legitimate authority should have both materialistic welfare and the regulation by the virtues, in which they represent a shift in both the approaches. The Chanakya represents a shift from the traditional towards the realism. Chanakya emphasized the realism of the order. Realism at that time was of the Matsyanaya. That means big fish consumes the small fish. Matsyanaya. Big state consumes small state. Big man suppress the poor. So Chanakya's Arthashastra comes out with the regulations, of restrictions on excess of the big fish, restrictions on the excess of the big fish. So it need an a virtue. It need a virtue of an individual should have internal excellence. That means a internal moral compass. That internal moral compass and the external audits. Internal moral compass is more than the external audit. By that, the peace can be attained. Peace can be attained only if we have the peace within ourselves. The internal moral compass that influences the external life. Both of them taught that the statecraft exists to protect the public from systemic exploitation. In which Chanakya's idea of Rajadharma, that means Rajadharma as a restrictions on the census. A census only by the means of internal restrictions. A civil servant could be tended towards lust, anger, greed, vanity, and arrogance. Vanity from arrogance. That means should have an attitude that the happiness of the should have an attitude. The welfare and happiness is a part of his world. Is part of his welfare and happiness of the people should be the part of the individual. A king should consider the welfare and and the happiness of the society. Society is a part of his world. There is no separation between the internal and the external. No separation between the internal and the external. So the internal restraint is important. Internal restraint is important one. The Chanakya's idea of the state is called as the idea of Sabdanga, the 7 attributes of the state. The 7 attributes of the state which act as a restraint, and which act as a regulatory instrument for the public servant to control his physical desire. And public servant should consider that the internal life is not different from the external life. So to overcome that, he needs to overcome the physical lust, the physical internal traps of lust, anger, and greed, vanity, and arrogance, to ensure the good governance. Chanakya ideas is based on realism of the socio-cultural environment. And a public servant is tended towards the physical desires to be overcome with certain internal restraints, as well as the role of the state to regulate the internal restraints, the internal desires of the people, and the public servant, the role of the state to act with the objective of public welfare. Then it was the Thiruvallur's idea Thiruvalluvar's ideas, which emphasize more on aram, a spotless, clean internal mindset. Spotless, clean. Aram depends on a spotless, clean internal mindset. That means to be seamless, spotless in mind is the true virtue. Manathukan masilan adal. Manathukan masilan adal. Anaithiran agula neela pira. Anaithiran agula neela pira. That means the internal mindset depends on his the internal mindset that depends on is the see, virtue is not an external checklist. It's not an external regulations. It is internal mindset called as aram, called as the aram. Aram and Thiruvalluvar highlights the aggregate of a leadership. A leader should have certain virtues. One is absolute integrity. Absolute integrity. That means there is no difference between the public role and the private role in conduct terms, where the internal and the external are the same. Where there is a righteousness in the heart, there is a beauty in the character, means there is a peace in the world and peace in the nation. There is no difference between internal and the external one. Then accessibility. A public servant is known for his genuine activeness and openness. Then moral courage, willing to speak truth, and refuses the complicit silence. See, Thiruvalluvar's ideas of certain public servant virtues. One is fortitude. One is the fortitude. The fortitude that means a true resilience. A resilience at the time of pressure. Idukkan padadavar. At the time of resilience, those who are in trouble, keeping the internal mind untroubled during the period of stress, at the time of flash climate events, at the time of public panics, at the time of intertribal violence, a leader should display fortitude. That means should resist panic. Every work has got passed through hundreds of difficulties. In 2021, hundreds of difficulties. A public servant virtue should have a greater degree of fortitude. A greater degree of fortitude even at the time of stress. Then pragmatism. வாய்மை எனப்படுவது யாதொன்றும் தீமை. Falsehood takes place of truth when it results. யாதொன்றும் தீமை இல்லாத செயல். When it results in common good. In the common good. where it is the virtue of honesty. Virtue of honesty. Honesty, a supreme baseline of administrative ethics in the protection of human life, preservation of public safety. Preservation of public safety. It gave when this Tirukural was given in 2018, it deals with the honesty. The Mellon Committee highlights honesty as one of the virtue of public servant. Honesty in the public life. Then the elitist isolation. Elitist isolation. It warns the public servant against bureaucratic arrogance. Bureaucratic arrogance. A public servant getting isolated from the people. Isolated from the people should be avoided. The isolated from the people should be avoided. The avoided, isolating from the people, then and being soft on speech, being soft on the speech, isolating from the people, distancing from the people, and bureaucratic arrogance is of antithesis to the public servant. Antithesis to the public servant. And it is fortitude, a virtue under pressure. It is pragmatic truth of honesty, pragmatic truth of honesty, and radical accessibility. Radical accessibility are the three finest virtues of the public servant. Three finest virtues of the public servant, in which public servants, three finest virtues. The primary goal that Chanakya's guidelines is to eliminate the big fish theory, where the Thiruvalluvar's guidance is to establish a moral ecosystem in which materialism should be approached in the context of materialism should be approached in the context of ethics, and in the context of the ethics. In handling the crisis, Chanakya advocates a calculated deterrence of the state, whereas Thiruvalluvar advocates a deep internal fortitude, a deep internal equanimity. And it is the discretionary choice. Chanakya considered state order as the supreme standards of Yogaksema, supreme standard, whereas Thiruvalluvar choice is of the human-centric, the citizen dignity. Citizen dignity is the standard of the ethical life of the people. So this seems to be a different. This seems to be the different lives in different period, having the common similarity that the role of the public servant and his objective is to ensure a society of welfare and ethical order. So this belongs to the ancient times. Then in the medieval times, where the Western philosophers of the medieval times, as the Christian philosophers of the medieval times, Saint Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, then Descartes. All the three belongs to different periods. When the society undergoing a systemic shocks of different period, it is necessity is the cradle of inventions. When the society was in shock, philosophical ideas given, 2017, during the period of systemic shocks, society survives only with the leadership of enduring ethical principles. It was the 15th century Europe known for disintegration of the Roman Empire because of barbarian invasion. It was full of chaos, confusion. It was social cynicism. Social relations is based on distrust, moral distress, crisis of conscience. Then philosophy required to have an internal anchor. At the time, the Saint Augustine stated that ethical actions is the outcome of the human will. He categorized the two types of the human will as cupiditas and caritas. Cupiditas, that means the human will with the objective of greed, pride, aggression, that leads to institutional collapse. Human will based on internal desires called as cupiditas, the internal desires called as the cupiditas. A leadership of internal desire leads to collapse. Whereas caritas, a will towards love, spiritual integrity, collective well-being becomes a leader of being steward of welfare, leader of being promoting steward of welfare. So it is the order and nature of the society and institution starts from the heart. Desire starts from the heart. If it is cupiditas, it leads to institutional exploitation. If it is caritas, as the quote of Abdul Kalam could be substantiated with the Saint Augustine's ideas. Saint Augustine establishes two model system of public governance. In his work called The City of God, two model system of public governance. One is a city of God. One is a city called as just city. One is called as the earthly city, the earthly city which is built on self-love, which is earthly city, which is built on earthly city and just city. Earthly city is one that built on love and compassion, called a city of God. Whereas just city, it is built on authority and coercion. In which the earthly city of God promoted the spiritual realization. Saint Augustine also stated that evil is simply a privy. It is a private behavior. It is not. It is stated. He infused with the Christian idea That evil is a private behavior. It exists in the physical desires. Where St. Austin stated, your physical body is created by Satan. So evil exists within you. Living your evil, it is a private. Living your evil is to discard your physical behavior, come out of your physical entity, come out of your physical entity, called as evil, as a privation, privato boni. That means the inner realization. Inner realization. Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have the right to do and what is right to do. What you have the right to do. A public servant have many rights, but the public servants do is action of discarding the evils to promote a public welfare of the city of God or the earthly city of God or the earthly city, seems to be the ideas of St. Augustine. Then Thomas Aquinas, another philosopher of the Christianity, who emphasized on the law, who emphasized the law as a means of ethical regulations, Thomas Aquinas stated, St. Augustine emphasized on moralities as a means of ethical regulation. Aquinas emphasized on the law. He categorized the law as the human law, divine law, natural law, and earthly law. Human law is codified rules and the statutes of dealing with regulations of the physical and the material life, but it has its limitations. You cannot you cannot make a lawful of every aspect of every behavior of the humanity. You cannot make. Smoking desires by the human individual, but you cannot make smoking as a law. There are limitations. Whereas natural law, human law is relative. Natural law is universal. Natural law is the outcome of intelligent regulations. Natural law, human law has the limitations to fulfill the principles of the natural law. Human law should have the limitations of not violating human dignity and public welfare. It becomes unjust law, lex initiasa. Yes, lex unjust law, because it has to get conformed to the natural law. Natural law. Thomas Aquinas' idea states, Thomas Aquinas' ideas was centered with a doctrine of prudence. Doctrine of prudence is the philosophical foundation of ethical governance. Every actions of the public service, should conform to the value of prudence. What is prudence? What is prudential? What is prudent? What is good? A good one should be universal. A good one should be universal. A universal that resolve all the human realities. Second, a good one should be a virtue of guide to resolve, to find out the corrective solutions in the concrete situations without compromising integrity. Then a prudent one should have a compassion, that a public. So every actions of the public servant should conform to the doctrine of prudence as an intellectual guide. A public action should express justice, fortitude, temperance. These are the virtues of the public servant. The actions of the public servant to confer to the doctrine of prudence. Almost everything is inseparable of good and evil. That the best judgment of the public's preponderance, best judgment is the demandful one, as 28. A best judgment in the governance should be based on the doctrine of principle of prudence. A prudent is one having the features of universal. Universal can be codified universally. A law is prudent. It can be codified universally. A law is prudent. It should act as an intellectual guide. A law is prudent because it is conformed to the natural law, conformed to the natural principles of natural justice. The virtues of the public servant as prudence in his action. Then justice, fortitude, temperance. Of the Thomas Aquinas. Then Descartes of the 17th century. Descartes of the 17th century becomes different age. Thomas Aquinas emphasized on law more than the morality is emphasized on the law. Means his age was known for the decline of logic, reason and moralities of the 13th century. It was the age of crusades. There was a great belief in the Christian world. Everything is determined by God. Everything is predetermined by the God. So reason has lost. And excess is important. At the time, the doctrine of prudence is not restrained the excess. You take part in the crusade, but all your actions should be prudentful. But in 17th century, the wars ended, religious wars ended. It was the age of scientific revolution. The age of the scientific revolution, that is a search for what is the real truth, in which Descartes emerged. In the age of science, in the age of curiosity of science. 17th century called as the age of science. Newton's law, Kepler's law, they all came. Curiosity of the science. The curiosity of the science, where Descartes stated every established thing has to be subjected to doubt, subjected to radical doubt, to have clarity. Where he stated, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. That means debiasing to the traditional practice. de-biasing towards the traditional. For a public servant, public administrator, it need a de-bias to the traditional practice, to question the deep-seated cultural biases, to reject the legacy of established traditions. Descartes came out with a new approach of curiosity by doubting the existing one. Descartes established certain codes of moralities, certain rules, the rules that defines the moralities, Descartes promoted the idea of deism, D-E-I-S-M, deism, the idea of the Descartes, who made a simile of God with the watchmaker. Descartes stated, that means rebuilt the intellectual foundations to the radical doubt of the established belief systems. That means deism analoged God with a watchmaker. A watchmaker manufactured a watch and enabled the watch to work of its own without interference. So God created a universe and enabled the universe to work. Enable the universe to work with the humans, with the mechanical law of moralities, certain natural laws of moralities, in which Descartes stated certain rules of getting conformed to the natural laws. One is provisional stability, where individuals has to comply with the local laws, to maintain a steady behavioral baseline during the period of uncertainty. Then second, where the resolution under pressure, a individual should have a resolute to execute certain decisions of a moral virtue, to execute certain decisions despite of pressure. Then mastery of the thoughts against the external conditions that enable to the individual's actions with the reasons. Descartes argued that emotions and the physical impulses are not inherently evil, but they fade the objective judgment. The ultimate duty of character is to subject passions to the rigorous check of reasons. The reasons can be achieved by doubtful inquiries. And the check of clear reason is the foundation for managing emotions and regulations in the civil services. So these were the three different medieval philosophers. Saint Augustine stated, eradicating the personal greed and arrogance is a virtue, whereas Thomas Aquinas, designing the human codes with the doctrine of prudentia, Descartes considered systemic doubt, to eliminate the traditional biases should be the virtue of civil servants. So these were the medieval medieval Western philosophers, whereas the medieval Indian lives, as like the Saint Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, we have the lives of triads of the Hindu philosophy. Triads of the Hindu philosophy or the Vedantic philosophy. That is, the triads are Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva. Whose lives emphasize on internal character, then probity in the system's socio-economic relations, then empathy in delivery towards the people. That means the Vedantic philosophy of all the three emphasized on internal realization, morality, awareness, internal realization that enable probity in the socio-cultural life, then empathy. So the empathy towards the people, empathy towards the public. In 2021, we can never obtain peace in the outer world unless we have the peace in ourselves. That means internal realization, exploring the inside-out journey, internal realization based on worldview, belief systems, internal virtues, worldview, belief system, and internal virtues. It was the medieval age of India, known for a severe philosophical blindness, known for a feudal caste rigidities, parochialism, it is a social crisis, the age of social crisis, the age of the social crisis in which three of the philosophers delivered. It was the Shankara's core philosophy called as the Advaita, the core philosophy of Advaita, who considered the souls, the individual soul and the universal soul are the same. If you harm somebody means you are harming also you. If you insulted somebody means you are also insulting yourself. That means Shankara was stated that there is no difference between the individual soul and the universal soul, but we are living in a Maya illusions of not understanding that separateness. This Maya or ignorance leads to nepotism. This ignorance leads to all the problems in the public square. That means not understanding that harming another human is literally harming oneself. As we are all sharing the common essence. In 2023. Do not hate anybody, because the hatred that comes out from you comes out from you must in the long run come back to you. Come back to you. But in the long run. So it is that illusion leads to corruption. Illusion leads to corruption. Understanding that you are the same as others, that cultivate, that laid foundations for empathy. That laid foundations for the empathy. That is a worldview. A worldview of oneness is the spiritual realization and ethical foundations, in which Shankara's life promotes the value of oneness reflected in an incident in the Varanasi. It is called as Varanasi encounter. Varanasi encounter in Varanasi, in Kasi, where the Shankara was confronted with the outcast, Chandala, outcast. And Shankara asked the outcast to set aside himself because he deals with untouchability of having friction with him. In that outcast, the Chandala replies, asking Shankara, you promoted a philosophy that it is the soul is the reality, not the physical. As you and I share the common water of Ganges, you and I share the common breath of the air in the Varanasi, you and I standing in the common sand of the Varanasi, but you are instructing me to do away. That means your instruction pointed either to my body or my soul. That led to internal realization. Varanasi encounter is a case study of humility. Case study of the humility, rank, seniority for a public servant. It is the case of realizing the humility, rank, seniority. Intellectual credentials do not confer moral superiority of any citizen. Do not confer moral superiority of any citizen. Then Viveka, that the spiritual enlightenment is the real-time cognitive filter, Viveka of understanding, oneness, equality, empathy is a real-time cognitive filter that expresses in all the actions, and all the actions, and all the decisions, and all the actions. A modern administrator should be above the criteria of the caste, wealth, and literacy. And Viveka is the cognitive tool to act. That is the idea of the Shankara's idea of the Advaita, oneness. Oneness is the foundation for all the civil servant virtues. Then Ramanuja, that is Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism. That means Jiva is the part of Brahma. There exists a bond like the mother and the infant, the Jiva and the part of Brahma, in which Ramanuja advocated the idea of Sarira Sariri Bhava, that is blood, body and soul relationship. Represent as a bond, where the Ramanuja considered that every citizen is a part of the. No citizen is isolated. State is not a mission. State is a living organism. State is analog to the state. State is a living organism with a bond, as like the bond between the soul and the body. There exists a bond between the state and the people. Bond between the state and the people. Between the state and the people, in which Ramanuja highlighted certain virtues. One is the Kainkarya as a virtue of charity, a virtue of being a duty, a duty to the society, as a civil servant should have a moral direction, moral compass of Kainkarya. His action as a Kainkarya, that means a duty without expecting the results, a duty of charity. In Tirukostiyur, as an episode of Varanasi to Shankara, Ramanuja's episode of Tirukostiyur episode of Ramanuja, who learned the certain secrets of Brahmanical preservations, Brahmanical conservations, taken the copies in writing. It was delivered to Ramanuja after a hardship of penance by the teachers in the temple of Tirukostiyur. The next day, Ramanuja has taken the copies and climbed to the tower of the temple, called the marginalized communities, the untouchables and the marginalized communities, and distributed those despite of the anger of the Brahmanical elites. That means a moral courage should be a lesson for the public servant, as of the moral courage accepting it, the moral courage of accepting the personal risk. So this attitude of Ramanuja later came out with certain structural reforms. It was the Ramanuja known for inclusiveness of the untouchables, who called untouchables as Tirukulathar as a prelude to Harijan of Gandhi. And Ramanuja's idea of Tirukulathar, and Ramanuja known for extending the Brahmanical traits of exclusiveness to the people, as Thiruman, having that symbols. Earliest one to inaugurate temple entry movements in India. And known for public processions of the deities, into the untouchable habitats. So it is a structural reforms, then affirmative action, extending Thiruman, then Mangala Sasanas, that means inclusion of Vaishnavite inclusion of lower traditions. These are all structural reforms as a lesson. Then trusteeship, that means Kainkarya as a stewardship of public welfare. Then Madhva, unlike the Shankara and Ramanuja, Madhva promoted the idea of dualism. Madhva emphasized much on realism of moral actions. It was the dualism. Madhva stated there is duality, Vedangal. Duality in reality. There are 5 Vedas, 5 differences. God is different from individual. As against to Shankara, Madhva stated that the soul of Brahma is different from the individual. Every individual soul is different from the individual. God is different from the matter, and soul is different from the matter. Every matter is different from the matter. Is the objectivity in governance. Objectivity in governance, to understand each decisions, each objects are different, and each having difference in accountability. Each having the difference in the accountability. It was the practical realism, which emphasized on the moral integrity. Morality is important. He rejected the idea of moral escapism. Personal accountability is inescapable. Every administrative action has to be gauged with the morality inside. State resources are real. Human sufferings are real. And it is the moral stewardship of the observators whose obligation is to resolve. It is the three different teachers, three different Shankara's Advaita, Ramanuja's qualified dualism, partly dualism, and Madhva's dualism. Shankara considered Viveka, moral realization. Moral realization is important for public welfare. Then Kaingarya, Ramanuja considered Kaingarya. Then Madhva considered moral accountability. Ideas of Shankara is of dissolving the difference between the citizens and the public servant. Idea of Ramanuja is of having the Kainkarya, that is the bond of difference between the public servant and the society. Idea of Madhva is of complete difference based on accountability. All Shankara's Viveka, Ramanuja's Kainkarya, Madhva's accountability substantiate the relevance of constitutional morality in different perspectives. So that seems to be the medieval. In that medieval period known for the greater crisis, the three philosophers attempted to direct the society in the intellectual spheres. Whereas the medieval period known for the values of Bhakti movement, whose life were the living models of moralities. The important Bhakti movements, Bhakti saints were selected were Sant Kabir, Guru Nanak, Guru Gobind Singh. Sant Kabir, Guru Nanak, and the Guru Gobind Singh. They emphasized more on morality's character Morality is character which determines the ethics on whose life highlighted the moral, highlighted the human values, in which Kabir, known for promoting a radical conscience against rituals, the Guru Nanak, known for inclusiveness, mobilizing the peoples, and Guru Govind Singh time known for the challenges. So guardians, challenges and the guardians. The problems of the medieval times at that time was religious polarization of Hindu-Muslim animosities, then caste rigidities, then imperial Mughals, sultans, medieval imperialism known for suppression, in which the common people suffered the problems of oppression of the state. Common people suffered the problems of communal based political events. Common people suffered. Woman was much suffered. Caste system. So, where the role of the Bhakti movement seems to be an intervention which is against the hierarchies of the society, championed the structural justice, and demanded the personal moralities in the life. One was the Kabir. The idea of Kabir, known for Nirguna Bhakti, considered the God and the Almighty is above the character, above gunas, above character. It is the divine is formless, universal, completely devoid of any sectarian character of the caste, language, and there is no discrimination. It is the formless reality. The formless reality that exists within ourselves. Kabir's ideas was based on rejection of hereditary ideal hierarchy in the society, against the caste, against the religious differences. Then idea promoted that the oneness of the things, oneness of the divine, Ram and Rahim. Then equality. Every citizen has the equal access to public services. Access to public services. In which the ideas of the Kabir was based on the truth, and against the rituals. Kabir used oral poetry called as bijaks. Kabir bijaks establishes Kabir bijaks was against the existing structural hierarchy, against the life of rituals. He stated that what is the use of shaving your head repeatedly if you completely fail to shave away deceptive desires in your mind? And against the ritualism, that means against the ritual means not only in the religious ritual, against to bureaucratic ritualism. That means Kabir stated that Kabir often confronted with the bureaucratic arrogance, and stated that the bureaucratic arrogance of red tapeism was Retapism was against to the divine. Then promoted an idea of alignment between inner convictions and outer actions. Inner convictions and the outer actions. Say outer actions. So Kabir's idea of Shakis, Shakis, which means Shakis, which means the guides of realization, the guides of the realization. The guides of the realization should have a moral commitment. Kabir's ideas of the moral realizations and public welfare, the idea of equalities. The idea of equalities seems to be an intervention, an antidote at the time of ritualism and the social hierarchy, on the communal rivalry between the Hindus and the Muslims. Then Guru Nanak promoted the idea of divine as one car, a divine of absolute unity between creator and the creation. Absolute unity between creator and the creation. That is absolute unity of the creator and the creation. Human beings are interconnected family. Human beings are the interconnected family. Then collective stewardship. Guru Nanak life known for an event of establishing a new settlement of peasants in Kartarpur of collective stewardship. This idea of the Guru Nanak seems to be against to the existing social hierarchies, which emphasized on collectivity and community leadership and community stewardship. It was the Guru Nanak who established Langar, who established the Langar, or the community kitchen of charity, community kitchen of the charity. And the ideas of the Guru Nanak emphasized on workplace integrity. Workplace kinda Kirat Karo deals with a workplace of honest labor, honest creative labor. Then Vand Chaku, which emphasized social responsibility of wealth. That means a wealth is corrupt if it is more than the utility of the society and community welfare. Then Nam Japna, that means moral affirmity in profession. Kirat Karo, a behavior of honesty for the public servant. Vand Chaku, an attitude of equality. Then Nam Japno, morality as the focus in public delivery systems. Represent a medieval reform in institutions and the social life. It was the Guru Nanak established Langar Sangat. Langar and the Sangat. Langar, that means a community kitchen in every Gurudwara, a universal kitchen of charity for inclusive public delivery and for promoting and to deal with the hunger for the poor. Then Sangat is the equality in management and collective responsibility. equality in management, and the collective responsibility. That is the ideas of Guru Nanak. Then Guru Gobind Singh. Guru Gobind Singh established a new idea of Sant Sipahi paradigm. Sant Sipahi paradigm. A saint and the public servant integrations. A saint and the public servant integrations. That means it's a fusion of sant and sipahi. Sipahi, public servant means at that time guardians of the public. Sipahis, guardians of the public, should have, that represents a public servant's moralities of accepting community leadership, protecting God against the oppressed. God against the oppressed. Then second, Sant Sipahi fusion, known for internal spiritual compass. That means morality as the compass guidance. Then the two-way integration of spiritualism and martialism, and martial martial skills, spiritualism and the martial skills, the spiritualism, then external tactical strength, martialism. So the leadership depend on a complete guardian of the society. A complete guardian of the society. The age of Guru Gobind Singh, known for the Mughal oppression in a greater scale. It was the age in which advocated a new model of life, a life of public responsibility, life of public guardianship, and known for the spiritual guidelines, the guidelines called as Doctrine of Nash. Doctrine of Nash talks about five type of Nash. A Nash means destruction. Nash means destruction. Nash, which means the destruction. The Guru Gobind Singh considered destruction is not a negative. Destruction is for a new construction. A destruction for the new birth. Destruction for a new birth. It talks about the five type of Nash. That means five type of destruction. Destruction for liberation. Destruction. Every liberation comes from the destruction. Guru Gobind Singh stated. One is Dharma Nash. That means a liberation from the traditional religious orthodoxy. Then Kirtanash, liberation from traditional orthodox social system. Then Kulnash, liberation from the lineage status of family, for administrative access. Then Karmnash, liberation from the traditional rituals. Brahmnash, liberation from the superstition. For that, a new ideal of individual, an ideal individual should be an ideal of Sant Sipahi fusion. A Sant Sipahi fusion that every individual comes through by liberating themselves from this. This represents a shift. By that Guru Gobind Singh able to establish a new life of virtues called as Panch Pairagi. A life that every individual should have. Five ethical virtues. The Panch Pairagi and the shared responsibility of guarding the society, of guarding the society. Nash doctrine is an institutional architecture, the institutional architecture of promoting integrity, intelligence, energy, promoting integrity, intelligence, and the energy to liberate ourselves. So these were the three different bhakti philosophy, bhakti saints. Three different bhakti saints were Saint Kabir emphasized on Nirguna Bhakti. That means, but beyond the character on the sectarian difference, Guru Nanak, one car, universal brotherhood and community welfare, and Guru Gobind Singh, Sant Sipahi ideal. In management of public, in the target of governance, Guru Kabir emphasized on eradicating red tapeism. Guru Nanak emphasized on community activity, collaborative ecosystem. Guru Gobind Singh emphasized on guardians of public guardians as an ideal, So represents the three great lives of the bhakti, of the medieval times, ancient and the medieval. In ancient, the ancient lives of the wisdom, that is triad, Socrates, Socrates method, has a Socrates method, and the state as a paternal entity. Then the Plato emphasized on cardinal virtues. Socrates emphasized on the knowledge. Plato emphasized on compassion, justice. And the Aristotle emphasized on mean, the principle of golden mean, and the habits of character. Then the Mahavir's ideas of Anikantavada, ahimsa, jiva. Then Buddha's idea of the samupada, pratyu samupada, madhyamika pada, pratyu samupada. Then the Thiruvallur's ideas of aram, to regulate the purul. Then Chanakya's idea of the state and amatya kosha, that moral attitude of the public servants. Then the medieval philosophies promoted by Saint Augustine's ideal of city of joy, where cupiditas and the caritas. Thomas Aquinas' idea of the natural laws. Then Descartes' idea of moral accountability. Then the medieval Indian philosophers, Shankara's idea of Advaita of non-duality, that is spiritual duality, and Maya as the ignorance. Then Shankara's idea of a civil servant convictions of equality and compassion. Then Ramanuja's bond between state and the people. Then Kainkarya Kainkarya, Vishishtadvaita, then Kainkarya, then reforms, then Madhva, idea of dualism, Veda. There existed duality always, and accountability, strict accountability, moral disciplines and the accountability. Then Kabir's idea of Nirguna, then Nanak's idea of community stewardship, then Guru Gobind Singh, Sant Sipai paradigms. A public servant should have spiritual realization as well as the physical, as well as the physical virility against oppression. Should have a sense of liberation from his nash, liberation from his orthodoxy, attitude of orthodoxy, rigidness towards the people. So these were the ideas that comes. Then modern lives. என்ன மேல முக்கியம்? விவேகானந்தா, காந்தி, சர்தார், விவேகானந்தா, காந்தி, சர்தார், then Nehru, then Gandhi, Sardar, Nehru, Vajpayee. Great lives. அடுத்து பின்னாடி வந்து இது வச்சுக்கலாம், இந்த philosophers சொல்லும்போது கோட்ஸ்ல போடும். ஜஸ்ட் இதை மட்டும் பாருங்க. இப்போ புக்ஸ் எல்லாம் வேணும், இது மட்டும் ஒவ்வொருத்தரும் ஒவ்வொரு இது. பப்ளிக் சர்வெண்ட்டுக்கு என்ன தேவை அவங்க லைஃப்? ஓகே, அவங்க சொன்னதுலையும் செஞ்சதுலையும் பப்ளிக் சர்வெண்ட்டுக்கு என்ன தேவை? See you in next class. Bye. நேற்று கிளாஸ் லைவ் ஸ்லைட்ஸ் வந்துதான். இதெல்லாம் அப்படியா? ஆமா, நேற்று சொன்னாரு. சரி, நான் கேட்டு சொல்றேன். என்ட்ரன்ஸ் தானே?